I am sitting here with a new arming jacket on. Some of you may know that my old arming jacket is disgustingly dirty, but it's sort of been with me for a long time and I'm very comfortable with it. I have a new arming jacket which I've got to get used to, so a new piece of kit. But most excitingly, I have had a lance rest attached to my cuirass. This is this really quite aggressive looking sticking out shelf of metal. It's called a lance rest, or is it? In fact, it comes from French for lance arrêt, and that means the lance stop rather than the lance rest. So it's one of those interesting words which has sort of become mangled in translation. A lance arrêt is designed to stop the lance going backwards under your arm. This one is solidly bolted to the front of my cuirass with a pretty fearsome piece of steel. The idea of this is that the lance will impact on this and the lance will not go back underneath my arm. I haven't ridden with a lance rest for a long time. In fact, the last time I rode with a lance rest and solid lance jousting was well over a decade ago at Kenilworth Castle. In 2008, Kenilworth Castle, guests of English heritage, Philippe Willaume and I were the first two people in the modern era to do what's called solid lance jousting, where we actually were hitting each other with solid pieces of wood with a metal tip on the end, and nobody actually knew what would happen. We didn't really know whether it would work very well. We didn't know whether we'd survive it. We didn't know if it would be spectacular, but it was. And that opened the way for a lot of people quite a few years later to do more solid lance jousting. I think standards have changed since then, and some people are better. To be fair, some people are not as experienced as we were back then. But it's exciting to see the sport of jousting moving ahead. But somebody had to pioneer it, and Philippe and I did that. In fact, I think I was the first person in the modern period to receive a strike on the helmet from a solid lance by Philippe in training. We'd had the helmets made, and I volunteered myself as a target for Philippe. And one of the weird things about jousting is that if you have a lance and you're trying to hit the other person, you can stay fairly calm about it. It's actually really unpleasant to ride towards the other person and know they're going to hit you, but you don't actually have a lance. You actually have a lot more time to think about what's going to happen. So I would thoroughly recommend not actually receiving a lance without having a lance in your own arm as well. Makes it much easier. One of the things with a new piece of kit like a lance rest, or rather an unfamiliar piece of kit for me, is to reacquaint myself and to acquaint Talos with it as well, because it behaves differently. The lance will behave differently. It's important before you do anything quite severe and quite extreme, like wearing full armour and using a full-length, full-weight war lance against a solid target, that you are comfortable with the equipment you've got. So the best thing to do is not do it for the first time when you're having to do it for real. So I'm going to use this as a stepping stone towards doing that war lance impact test. The other thing is the weather's pretty bad at the moment. It's very muddy outside. We've got a little bit of sun, but it's pretty grim underfoot. So I want to wait till the weather improves. I'm not really in medieval kit. I've got medieval upper half on, and I'll be putting this armour on, and then I'll show you what the lance rest does with the lance itself. It's a different technique, and unfortunately I'm not aware of any contemporary historical records that tell us how to use a lance when it goes into a lance rest, and a lot of the illustrations we see have some complexities and differences to them, so it might be that there were loads of different techniques. So I'm going to show you the technique that I use when I use a lance rest. So take it with a pinch of salt. There might be lots of different ways of doing this. The arrêt or lance rest is an integral part of the weapon system that is a man and a lance, and it's also important for the sporting system, which is the joust. So getting familiar with this was an important skill for a medieval knight. Right, I'm in my armour now, and it's gone on slightly differently today, but that's partly because I've got a new arming jacket. This is my short lance, short spear. It's just a stick of ash. It's not very heavy, but it is quite useful. One of the things that's immediately obvious about a lance rest is that it sticks out something ferocious and gets in the way, and if this was sharp it could do your squire quite a lot of damage. So you can see how far it sticks out. Now obviously if I didn't want to use the lance rest, I can pull the pin out and I could take the lance rest off, but I've got it on. Maybe it was put on after arming, we just don't know. It probably was, probably wasn't, depends on the situation. But there it is, it sticks out quite a long way. Yet more evidence, if we ever needed it, that medieval knights had lots of staff. You would have people around you doing stuff for you. Having this sticking out is really awkward. But you could see how it goes against my arm, where it is. The positioning of this sort of depends on the thickness of the lance and what you're trying to do with it. But let me just show you. So the idea, obviously, if you are ordinarily using a lance, you could couch by just coming up through your arm, but with a lance rest or a lanceret, you have to put the lance in under your arm, kind of vertically, or not quite vertically, just off vertically, and then it comes down and locks in to the lance rest. So you can see I actually don't really need this hand. This hand can guide a little bit, but is not going to actually take too much of the energy of the lance, and all of the energy of the lance, if this is constructed properly, it would have what's called a grapper here, which in the early days is simply a strap of leather nailed onto the lance. That would go here. If the lance goes backwards, it just jams in to the lance arete, hence lance stop or lance rest. Just would jam it there and all the energy would go back that way and the lance wouldn't fly out underneath my arm. For a really heavy lance, this is actually quite comfortable because it's just a little bit of a lifting pressure under my shoulder here, and I would of course be wearing armour there, so there wouldn't be too much of an issue there. There'd be lots of weight of armour pressing down. But here's the big issue. The lance is kind of attached to you. So if you want to lower the lance, you can sort of shrug your shoulders a bit, but that's not particularly effective. What you end up doing is a combination of moving your arm, your shoulder, and leaning forwards. And you can see that if you slightly lean forwards, that the lance dips quite a lot. So in a lot of medieval illustrations, we see some quite forward positions of the knight. So with a fat lance, that would enable me to have this lance sort of pointing up more normally, and then when I'm leaning forwards I would adjust it. So it's a whole body system. So it's very different from just having a lance and controlling it with your hand. It's a spear technique. It's actually very different, and in the panic when you've got a helmet on you actually can't see down to your lance rest. So you grab the lance like this and you would have to bring it up high and then lower it into the lance rest and hope it's in the right position before you actually start doing your run. So there's quite a lot of complexity in using a lance rest or lance arete. And so it's not the sort of thing you just want to put on and have a go with. You really need to do a bit of training and work up to using it for real in a joust, which is what I would have done. You can see how much technical skill there is in actually using a lance rest properly. It's quite a different technique than just a spear in the hand or a lance in the hand and under the arm. And so it needs a little bit more training than you might expect. And the positioning of this and the design of this is awkward to do. You've got to work out what works, what doesn't work, and maybe change this. But this is an early period lance rest, which is just flat. In later periods they end up with hooks, all sorts of other fancy stuff. But this is the beginning of the process of, if you like, attaching the lance to the man rather than the man holding the lance. So this should enable you to hit really hard. Let's go and get on a horse and try this out. I'm going to go gently on Talos. He's in training still, and quite frankly, so am I with a lance rest. And let's see how it goes. We'll go very gently to begin with, step by step, see how it goes. Good boy, come on. Good lad. Good boy. just getting Talos ready has actually proven that you probably didn't handle horses while having a lance rest. This 6-inch sticking out piece, 10-12 centimeters of metal, it's not sharp, but it sticks out a long way, and just handling your horse, tacking him up, it gets in the way a lot. So I wouldn't recommend managing a horse with a lance rest. I suppose if you have to, you have to. I don't have anybody else to get my horse ready for me, which medieval knights would have done, so I've had to do it myself. And part of his training is getting him used to me being in armour as well, and he's been very good. I've also tied up his forelock so that it's out of the way so that he can see. So let's do a few runs and see how the lance rest goes with him. The big mounting block for a big horse. Walk on a bit, walk on. Good boy, whoa, whoa, whoa. Thank you. Great thing with the mounting block is you can literally just step onto a horse. You don't have to put any stress on its back at all. So first things first, Talos is actually very comfortable with me in the armour, and that's not a small thing. This stuff makes a lot of noise, and he's been trained to it, but you've got to start somewhere. And he seems completely unfazed by it, which is fantastic, which bodes well for the future. Good boy, come on. Good lad. I'm going to go and get the practice lance. Talos seems nice and calm with the armour. It's always a good place to start. He's also trying to do his fancy Spanish walk moves. Come on. Up. Up. Good boy. His party trick. Let's go and get a lance. He wants to get going. Good boy. Good boy. Come on. This, my practice lance, as I said before. Now on horseback, you suddenly realise how awkward it is. Steady now, come on. Good boy. So I have to bring it up and then lower it, and then I have to strike by moving my body a little bit. Oh, yes, yeah, there it is. Good boy, yeah, good boy. Important to let him play with the lance so that he's not frightened by it, because he's going to have to do quite a lot of jousting with me one day. Good boy. Now I've got horse saliva all over it. Let me just do a couple of simple runs just to show you what I think the lance rest technique would be. So good boy, come on then. Come on you. I'm going to do this slowly to begin with. Salute, lift the lance, hold it, engage the lance, and then angle it. Now, one of the things that's immediately obvious to me is that the rider bouncing around has a much bigger effect on the lance than I would have thought. Let me just try that again. Good boy, come on. Good boy. Come on, good boy, come on. Good lad. Again, very slow. Salute, engage, lower. Yeah, it's a very different technique to the freelance technique, if you like, that I use, the non-lance rest technique. Come on, get up. I'll do it at a little bit more speed and see how that feels. Obviously it'll be different with a bigger lance, but a longer lance and a heavier lance. And of course the timing varies hugely if you're going at speed. Good boy. Completely missed Talos. So he was completely put off there by my balance shifting. So that's something I've got to learn. That wasn't good. Good boy. Let me try again. At speed. Good boy. Down we go. Down we go. Good boy. Good boy. Good boy. Come on then. Up. No. Oh. Good boy. Whoa, 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 whoa. I tell you what, it's a totally different technique than I'm used to. This is going to take some training, especially with a heavy war lance. I'll try a couple more and then I'll call it quits for today, and then we'll keep doing more training. Good boy. Good boy. Come on then. Good boy. Whoa, 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 whoa. No, 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 no. The good thing is he's going very well, so his training is coming to the fore, but it's the use of the lance rest that is causing me some problems. Let's do one more. Let's try and hit it. Try and hit it. Be a nice way to finish. Good boy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Come on. Good boy. Good boy. That'll do him. Done ever so well. All I can say is it's something to re-familiarise myself with. This lance rest means that I'm missing the target by a couple of inches low. So I've obviously got to look at my technique and modify it. But Talos is going brilliantly well. He's raring to go. He's enjoyed me in the armour and he really wants me to get on with it. So I think that's been very successful. Come on then, walk on. Good boy. Let's get off you, you big thing.